this, brother.
After last week with the technical difficulties here, Draven and I are back. We are ready to record Observe This. We are in the month of June 1989.
That's right.
You know how diehard we are about this. Our two baseball teams are playing against each other, and we are recording instead of watching.
Right now, that's right. Yes. Well, did you take a look at the score before you got on here?
Last I saw, it was 2-1 Giants, but like I told you, I have no faith in them holding this lead.
Come on, man. You gotta hold on to that hope. Bottom of the seventh. Bottom of the seventh, they're still winning. So
if they could score more than a run or two a game, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, Glasnow went 5, so we'll take it.
Robbie Ray, his first appearance since having like 2 really bad injuries. I think he had a Tommy John, and then he had like a tendon in his elbow. 6 no-hit innings, I think. And he gave up a run in the first, but that was off of just wildness and walks and stuff. So, all right, enough about baseball. But that's how excited we are to record. Last week we tried to record, we had some difficulties, but as you can see, those difficulties are all figured out and we're ready to go. So, let's talk about
the share shot from hell that I just saw about an hour ago, or because that was insane.
And you're talking Blood and Guts, yes.
Yes,
Blood and Guts was. I actually thought that show was actually pretty good.
It was a good show, and I think they're on a little run there where they've had maybe 2 or 3 really good shows. When it comes to the wrestling, of course, they're always going to have good shows, but. Man, I saw that chair shot and it brought me back to Raven and the Sandman, back at the ECW arena and being crucified and whatnot. Yeah, man, I don't know how that's gonna go over with the internet crowd because we don't hit people in the head anymore, and that was a stiff, like one of those. You know what it reminded me of? Remember when Eddie Guerrero took one from JBL at that Judgment Day pay-per-view back in 04? That's what it looked like, man. It's when the chair gets folded, and I don't know if they're gonna say that the chair was gimmicked or what.
Yeah, I was hoping that it was, but
I don't think so, man.
I don't know how Jack Perry is able to quit when he is concussed. So that was a little bit of a thing. You knock this dude out, and then you're gonna set him on fire.
Well, he didn't quit. Nick Jackson quit for him.
I know, but how was he supposed to answer? He was barely conscious.
Anyways, I got my screwdriver here and ready to go.
All right. I thought about having a drink too, but I had some wine earlier, so I was like, you know what? I probably should not have any. Okay, talking about June 1989, and what I wanted to start with, John the Rock and I, we have this we have this extra podcast called Popcorn and Pile Drivers, where we review wrestling movies. And the last one that we did, we were actually on a little bit of a hiatus because of some personal things with John. His kids injured each other recently, so we've had to put off some recordings. I think they're fine though. But we did No Holds Barred, and that was a lot of fun revisiting that movie. I hadn't seen it since it had come out, but you are a different type of movie fan. You're actually a real movie critic. Now, when you think about bad movies like that, like, are you able to actually still be a movie critic, or do you have to give some benefit of the doubt or else you're just like hating life while you're watching this movie?
No, everything has to be kind of contained to what you're reviewing, right? You can't really, and there's a lot of variables, right? And WWF Studios, which was in early stages at that time, and you kind of try to look at the source, right? Who's directing it? Who's producing it? What is the target audience, which is important? And when you're watching a film like No Holds Barred, which is completely ridiculous and absurd, and it really defies logic in a lot of the scenes. But then again, what is the WWF in '89? That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So Vince, what he thought was entertainment and what he thought was going to make money was what was already making him money, and he just transferred it over to movie form. And so when I see it from that perspective, I have a good time with it. It's wacky, and so it's and I also classify it as a comedy. So it's like, it's not drama. I mean, you could say it's a little actiony, but yeah, I mean, is it horrible? Yes. But is it fun? I would say so, if you allow it to be.
It was so much better than Ready to Rumble. It's not even funny. That movie was poor. Like,
You
just
know what that movie was? That movie was malicious, and sometimes that transfers through, right? And that movie was the producers and the creative minds behind it, kind of making fun of the wrestling audience,
Yeah.
and saying this is who you are, this is how the mainstream sees you, and you're just a joke. And so when as a wrestling fan, when we're watching that movie, it seeps right through. You feel it, like, what the fuck, you know? And so yeah, no, that's a whole different level of bad.
Yeah. So I would say, and I like your thought that it's a comedy, because there's so many hilarious parts of this movie that I don't think were meant to be funny. Here's my number one question for you. By the way, Dave Meltzer, when he's reviewing this movie, and he's kind of writing a lot of things in the lead up, because he's trying to figure out how the movie business works, which is not part of his job. So the observers are about like him studying the movie industry and figuring out like how much does WWE or Titan get paid versus how much the movie studio gets paid, and does Vince the one who foot the whole thing, or like how does that whole thing work? So he's learning the movie business. But his headline, or maybe his lead sentence, was that No Holds Barred wasn't released; it escaped, or something to that effect. And I reminded him of that not too long ago, of that headline, actually, when John and I were reviewing the movie, and he remembered the headline perfectly, because I think I said it wrong to him, and he had it like in his back pocket. So, but the funny thing is, here's my question to you: is Rip, Hulk Hogan's character, is he supposed to be a virgin in this movie?
Yes.
Okay, because if Hulk Hogan is a virgin in this movie, it makes a whole lot more sense as far as his chemistry with Joan Severance's character is concerned.
But remember that he's also this big version of like what a teenager should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because that's what the Hulk Hogan character is, and so he's essentially this big teenager, this big overgrown teenager, who's discovering himself, right? And so it makes sense, even though at this point he's probably in his mid-30s, But yeah, there's that innocence. And remember, like, but you know what's interesting to me is that the target audience would probably be preteens, right? Because teenagers, there's no way they're gonna see this guy as being cool.
Yeah,
He's a virgin who's like dividing the beds, and putting the little sheets over. But I think a preteen would look at that and be like, well, I mean, he's still cool, he's still Rip, But a teenager would be like, who the fuck is this guy, Like, especially where I grew up.
yeah.
So I think this was made more towards preteens, maybe 10-year-old kids, and that's the role model that Vince saw, so that's what he promoted.
Okay, I would have been 12, 13 time frame when this movie came out. I remember. This is my understanding of the movie industry. I think it was like week 2, and it had already left the movie theater that all the new releases were at, and it had already gone to the budget theater in like week 2. So that's how I knew. I was like, okay, this movie's not making any money at 12 years old. I knew that much, and so I probably went to the budget movie theater, which was probably like $250 or something like that, and that's how I watched it. Did you would have been way younger though? So do you remember when you actually watched this movie?
I would have been about around 8, but I was already watching like rated R stuff, just because of the way I was brought up. And I watched it when it came out that December. I watched it with
on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, that was the first time I watched it, and I don't remember having any kinds of thoughts about it one way or another. I think growing up in the inner city, I mean, obviously a 10-year-old kid is going to be a little more developed because we've seen more stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it was just another cartoon. That's what I remember. It was like, it's just another wrestling. It's a wrestling movie with Hulk Hogan in it. But I don't remember liking it, so that means I probably didn't like it because the films that I do like kind of stayed with me.
Yeah.
But
Especially
it wasn't
from that late 80s time frame. I mean, there's
yeah,
lots
yeah,
of
because
stuff
at that time, I mean,
wonderful.
we're looking at Sly, you know, we're looking at John Claude, we're looking at Steven Seagal. Those are
Batman.
our heroes, you know. Those, well, yeah, at '89 is Batman, of course, big movie. But those are our heroes, and we're seeing them kick ass, like real ass, and get the chicks and all that. And here we're seeing Hulk Hogan, you know, being embarrassed to sleep next to a chick. So, yeah, so I remember watching it, but having no thoughts one way or another, you know.
At that point, I think my main concern is my dad embarrassed to watch this movie? Because that was like my that was how I sort of rated stuff on whether it was like, should I be embarrassed to watch or listen to this, or is this okay? And it was sort of based on, my dad grew up as a wrestling fan. So, by 1986 or 85, when I was kind of curious about it, he was like, you can watch it. It's totally fun, but it's fake. And they screwed Pepper Gomez. That was like kind of my introduction to wrestling. He's like, I was in, and then they suckered me by making Pepper Gomez look so stupid, and then I felt dumb for watching. So just be ready for stuff like that. And I was like, okay, and yeah, a lot of that stuff does happen in wrestling. So, so this movie, so Dave is trying to figure out what success looks like for this movie. So he's got a paragraph, and he basically says, if Hogan and Vince set out to make a great movie, of course they failed. But Vince doesn't look at success with the quality of the product in mind. If Vince set out to make money on the movie, he'd probably have a safer investment and a healthier return when everything is added up, investing in real estate. But if he set out to prove he could make a movie, the public would buy it, then he would be successful. And ultimately, if he set out to make a movie to gain more publicity for his wrestling company and then tie it in with one of his one or two pay-per-views, then once again, he was successful. And what he's alluding to is something that you and I will talk about in a couple months, which is Zeus being the main bad guy for SummerSlam, which does a really, really good buy rate for them. So here's a question I asked John when we were watching this, and I'll ask you. Is No Holds Barred a success, or did Vince McMahon make up all of the money that he might have lost on the actual release of the movie by booking Zeus as a pro wrestler?
I think no matter how you see it, I think No Holds Barred was a success. I think it gave Vince McMahon a foothold in the movie industry, right? It opened doors for it allowed him to network with different people. So even at a loss, it was still successful in opening up more avenues for later movies, which he did, So in that sense, I think it was a success. So No Holds Barred was a money losing proposition to open up doors, which is a lot of businesses do.
Yeah.
It also promoted Hulk Hogan as a name that goes beyond being a wrestler, right? It made him an actor, for better or worse. And then, to Vince McMahon's credit, he was still able to make a profit by the pay-per-views and by promoting Zeus that came right out of the movie. So I think when you tabulate everything, I think it was a successful film, and so sometimes you got to do things like that, so I would say it was a successful venture, even though the movie itself probably broke even, and New Line probably took most of the money, whatever it made. I'm sure New Line took most of it, but Vince knew that. So Vince knew that he was kind of like an outsider in this business of the movie business. So he was like, well, I have no leverage with New Line, but at the very least, they're gonna put my name out there, and so that's what happened. So I think it was a successful venture for that reason.
Okay, last question, and we'll move on from No Holds Barred. Do you think Vince should have used his pro wrestlers in the universe he's already created? Like, should Rip have just been Hulk Hogan, and this should have been the WWF, and the evil guy is from the other cable company? We could have called him, Med Murner or something. instead of trying to create a fictional world of a fictional world, I kind of wonder if it would have done better if it was just promoted as Hulk Hogan in WWF in a movie, sort of like El Santo or, whatever, like just as Hulk Hogan instead of as Rip.
I think there's a lot of legal issues that come with that, and especially with New Line involved. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable with the Hulk Hogan character. Keep in mind that the name Hulk, they had to pay royalties to Marvel for a little while.
Do they still do that to Marvel, or did they bought that out somehow?
Well, that's why Hollywood Hogan. That's why he became Hollywood. That was one of the main motivators for Hollywood Hogan, that he didn't have to pay Marvel anymore. But the point is that I think once you got New Line involved, and once you got the movie people involved, it was more like, well, we need an actual script here. We need a screenplay. We can't, because then it got very meta at a time when that wasn't really in style. Right now,
yeah.
Even like with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out, it's in style. It's in vogue to be meta and whatnot.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was like, what the fuck? What do you mean you're gonna have Hulk Hogan in a movie and he's a wrestler? And then I think Vince would have to have somehow explained that. And now in the times that we live in today, when everything is live, yeah, you could have a film and television production go on at the same time. But back then, when everything was so tape in advance, I feel like it would have been a nightmare to try to sync all this together. Like Hogan going through his deal against Zeus, but also going through his deal with the Boss Man. Like, what the fuck's going on here? So yeah, I mean, even like I remember when the Avengers came out.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came out.
Right.
And for the first season, God bless them for this, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. tried so hard to keep track with the movies so that they could kind of make sense. After a while, they just they were like, fuck it, we can't do this. And so Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. created their own storylines that were separate from the MCU. So it's hard. It's hard to keep all that in line. And I think at the end of the day, it was easier just to create a character.
Mm-hmm.
But where it gets weird is that, but then later on, you were going to bring Zeus in anyway.
Right.
So that muddles up the water even more,
And that is, it's not confusing, but it's just so hokey that when he does come in, they even have the gentleman who plays the promoter. You know his name.
Yes.
What is
the character? He's a good character actor.
Yeah, the tall guy. Very. He's the main bad guy outside of Zeus in the movie.
He's like, a Ted Turner of that movie.
He's exactly what he is. He's on WWE TV being interviewed by Mean Gene, I think, as the character in the movie, and Zeus comes into WWF. I keep saying WWE. WWF because he believes he's the star of the movie. So there's like this weird inside the movie character thing going on in WWF that, I mean, if you watch it back, it's so hokey and it's so bad, but
it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. No. Because even if Hogan acknowledges that he was playing a character called Rip, why would Zeus be mad at Hogan? Like why wouldn't Zeus be mad at the producers or the directors of the film, right? Because they didn't promote him as the main star. And who is Zeus? Like, isn't that Tiny Lister? Like, isn't that like the actor? So none of this makes sense. And our heads would explode if we try to make sense out of something that wasn't meant to make sense, And I don't know, as we move on through the months, I don't know how much Dave tries to make sense of all this, or maybe he doesn't. But it's very headache inducing if you try.
Yeah. So Dave writes that Walt Disney Productions wants Hulk Hogan for a movie since he now has a track record of being able to draw kids to theaters. Do you remember what was the movie that they did with where Mark Calloway was also in it?
That would have been Suburban Commando.
Where did they do that movie?
I think that was still an in-house movie, but you know what? I believe Disney distributed it. Yeah, Disney did distribute that film.
That's what it was. And
then they kept them around for a while because Three Ninjas, or whatever that movie was called, up in some sort of mountain. I forget the name of the whole name of the movie. That was also a Disney production because they had the Three Ninjas gimmick going for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they stuck by him for a minute.
I need to Is Michael Eisner still alive? Could we talk to Michael Eisner? What thoughts on
Yes, he
Hulk
is.
Hogan? Yeah,
Yes,
he
he is.
actually the Disney War is a really good book. If anybody wants to learn a lot about
I
that
haven't
time,
read it. Pick it up.
yeah, it's really good. Okay, so let's stay in WWF. We'll stay in WWF and we'll kind of end in WCW because in WCW it is the Great American Bash Tour. It is Clash of the Champions, and the next month is the Great American Bash pay-per-view with Ric Flair and Terry Funk. But let's just kind of hang out in WWF because there are some introductions of new people coming over. The biggest one, the most valuable one, I guess you could say, is Dusty Rhodes. The skits to Dusty Rhodes as the plumber and doing all the gross stuff to show that he is just a normal guy. They start. Do you remember, did you remember understanding that this was the guy that was also in the other company and now he's in WWF when he
Yes,
came over?
it was weird. It was weird because this is not a part of Dusty that we ever saw, and it was even more weird because he was a former world champion. So why is he fixing a lady's toilet? Like it doesn't make sense. Um, One of the blurbs that was interesting is that Dave did say that he only agreed to come in for a year,
Yeah.
which I didn't know. That was news to me because he really only stayed for about a year plus, and then he actually got fired, contrary to popular belief. He didn't quit. And I think this is just the beginning of Vince humiliating him, right? This is Vince, because one of the things that you haven't stated was that when he ran his company, that little indie that he had over in Florida,
FCW,
he ran it into the ground, and it was losing money. And he actually fucked a lot of those guys over because he said that he was going to be doing business with WWF, but he was still going to be running it from afar. And I think it was like the first week, and he's just gone. Like Dusty's gone.
Yep.
And I think Steve Kern takes over and tries to keep it afloat, but eventually it dies. But Dusty did sink a lot of his own money into that company. And so Dusty was in financial strain, which would evidently be something that he would deal with for the rest of his life. He was always in debt for some reason. Well, I mean, we know why, because guys of his era were always kind of overspenders. But so here we see Vince kind of taking advantage of the leverage he has over Dusty, and he has these vignettes, and he starts humiliating him, working on toilets, delivering pizza, working, as a butcher, if I remember one of them. But to Dusty's credit, right? To Dusty's credit, he was all in on these.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't like half dogging it. He was like all in on them, and it got him over. He was over for that 1 year, and he was always very proud of that. By the way, he would always say, "Well, no matter what Vince tried to do to me, I got it over."
Yeah.
And so he, in a sense, he got the last laugh. But yeah, I remember those vignettes because Dusty was one of my favorites in 87, 88. And it was just surreal to me. Like, why? But then I just became a fan of Polka Dot Dusty. Like, I was a fan of his, And so he was one of my favorites during that year run.
There's currently I don't know if you were on Instagram or TikTok or any of those where people just scroll through these stories, but I see this one pop up or people send it to me a lot. Like I forget what the title is, but it's like when wrestling was cool or something. And all it is a spot where Dusty gives the bionic elbow to Akeem, and Akeem just does like the slow walk sell, and Dusty's like kind of doing the thing and like seeing when he's gonna fall down. Like that is now back in on social media is Dusty Rhodes as that American Dream character, just doing elbows to Akeem the African Dream. So I will tell you, my relationship with Dusty in 1989 was a little weird because I didn't understand why he turned, like he did this thing with the Road Warriors and like he kind of turned heel, or there was like blood involved, and like then he got in trouble, and I was just really confused about what was going on. And so I didn't really know. I was just like, I wasn't that clued into it. I was reading my Pro Wrestling Illustrated, but I hadn't found Mr. Meltzer there yet.
Well, that's going to give you a source right there.
Exactly. I wouldn't find Dave's writing for probably another year or two in the National. I don't know if you ever saw any copies of the old National.
No, I think I was a little too young for that, and really not interested at that point. So I
Yeah.
hadn't. I never. I mean, Lord knows I've heard of Frank DeFord because they won't allow us to forget.
Of course.
But as far as actually having an actual copy of the National in my hand, I never had the privilege. But yeah. So going back to what you said, I think it wasn't supposed to make sense to you or to anyone because right before Dusty left, there was a lot of a combination of like the real life politics getting involved with the storylines. 1 minute he's a heel, the next minute he's a baby face.
Yeah.
And then I think what you're thinking about is the Road Warrior angle where with the weightlifting, right?
Yeah.
And I think he gigs. And so because they turned heel on him.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
And so he gigs at like 6, they call it dinner hour, right? And
yeah,
the old Bible Belt.
Blood, yeah.
And so that got him in a lot of trouble with Turner. But at that time he thought he had leverage, right? He's like, well, I'll go. And then that's when Ted Turner came in, because that was when he was Ric Flair goes or I go. And then Ted is like, well, Rick's got to stay. And so he left. Yeah. So there was a lot of like different politics going on. There's the whole Rick Steiner beating Ric Flair in 5-minute debacle at Starrcade. And so, yeah, his tenure there towards the end wasn't that pretty, and a lot of it was very convoluted. So you're not tripping. I mean, it wasn't making sense towards the end.
But I will admit that it was one of the cool moments of being a young wrestling fan, because when I was able to go to school, people would say, oh, like, who's this fat guy in the polka dots? And I was like, fat guy in the polka dots? Do you not know who that guy is? That's the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. But to someone who didn't pay attention to WCW or to Crockett, they were just like, who's the fat guy in the polka dots? And to that audience who just saw him as this old man in polka dots, that's the audience that you're saying that he got over with, because the people who were WCW fans were mad that that was who he became in WWF.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the smart marks at that time were mad. I think somebody like myself, who at this time was 8, like I said, I just accepted him as the polka dot Dusty, and then he just got over with me in that sense, So I think the smart marks really got mad because, again, it's always been a battle, right? I mean, for years and years to this day, it's been a lot of the Meltzer followers against Vince, and so. Yeah, this is one of their guys, man. This is one of the guys that was fighting the good fight against the establishment, and that was the WWF. And now he's there, and they made him a clown. And so a lot of the smart marks were very upset about that.
I really can't wait to start whatever the first Saturday night main event he's on, whatever, he's on. Is he on SummerSlam? Do you remember?
Yeah, he wrestles Honky.
Okay, so he's on Summer. I can't wait to revisit. Like, I'm not going ahead of the game here. I'm not like watching stuff I'm like in the month that we are. That's
neither am I. There's no time for that. I wish there was, but there's no time for that. So I try to stick to the month. Actually, I got a little ahead of myself because I saw the Great American Bash thinking it was June for some reason.
Oh yeah,
it was July. But that's a good show. That's one of the greatest shows ever. So I'm okay with that.
When Terry passed away, I did go back and watch pretty much all of the Rick and Terry stuff. What is the show? I think it is the Great American Bash. Is it the Great American Bash at the end when Flair and Sting are fighting Funk and Muta all over the arena? No, or is that's
the Clash after?
Okay.
Yes.
Because there's an end interview that I'm dying for you to see. Ric Flair all bloody, JR's interviewing him in front of in the audience, almost like, I forget where the camera's actually set. But JR asks him a question and Rick is cutting his promo. And if you look closely at JR, this is, your Teddy Ruxpin moment here where you like to call him Teddy Ruxpin.
I love it.
JR is mouthing Ric Flair's promo to the camera word for word.
That was very common. Jesse Ventura would do that all the time, and it gets annoying.
Yeah, so I can't wait to get there. I can't wait to get there because you're gonna crack up just watching Jim Ross smile and mouth this promo that Ric Flair is cutting. Who else is kind of coming and going? Well, Jake the Snake has to have another operation on his neck that Dave says is from Honky's guitar shot. That's like the guitar shot from hell. Like, did they not gimmick the thing? Like, what?
They did. I mean, look at the video. I'm sure they didn't, but Jake likes to blame a lot of his demons on that night, and I'm like, bro, you had him way before that night. And
Yeah,
you know, it's interesting. I think that I Mandela affected myself because I could have sworn that I remember there was an angle that wrote Jake out of TV where Ted DiBiase stuffs money into his throat, and this is gonna be very cartoony, but he stuffs so much money into his throat that he messes up his throat, and he's out for a while. But I guess it never existed. I guess I just had a dream about it or something because he just vanishes from TV, and then Dusty takes his bookings on the road. But on TV, it's just $1 Million Man just cuts promos. That's why that whole angle lasted a whole year. It started at WrestleMania 5, and it ends at WrestleMania 6. You know, and so I was wondering they got a whole year out of that angle with Ted DiBiase and Jake, but it was because Jake was out for like half of it.
Big John Studd is already done. He wins the Royal Rumble, gets the WrestleMania 5 match against Andre, and he's just kind of done with it. I think there's some payoff stuff. There's some stuff where he and Andre aren't getting along, and that's the dude who he's constantly on the road with, and he's just an unhappy guy. It's not the 1984 WWF that he was used to, I guess.
Yeah, I think he just wasn't getting over, right? And he was beat up, and he couldn't hardly even move. So it was just like, yeah. I mean, I think the WrestleMania 5 payoff was the one that really upset him, and so he quits. And Andre goes right to Duggan. I think he started working with Duggan right after.
When I was really getting into WWF, everybody remembers Coliseum Home Video. And I remember like the early volumes, you were talking like 1 through 5. Big John Studd just seemed like the meanest guy to me. And then I think he was also, did he wrestle Hogan on like the A-Team or something? Like they have like a match with Hogan and John Studd.
I don't remember.
On the A-Team. But like to me, impressionable, you know, at that time, I'm probably like 8 or 9 years old. Like to impressionable me at that time, I just saw Big John Studd as like the meanest, nastiest villain. So much so that when you remember those LJN toys, those big rubber guys?
Yes, right.
Like
right.
like the first match for me was Hogan and Studd. Like that's who I had to wrestle. But then when he comes back in 89, I'm just like, who's this guy? Like he's a baby face, and he just did not seem like even close to the Stud that I remember from growing up and watching in the beginning. So yeah, he did not work out at all.
No, but remember he did pop a football as a shoot at that WrestleMania 2 promo. I don't know if it was with Russ Francis or one of them, but he got a football, an actual football, and he popped it right on the air. I don't know if it was gimmicked or not, but it looked pretty impressive.
I mean, him and Freilich were like the best part of that match when it came
I think it was
like
Freilich. He just grabbed it from Freilich and just popped it, and I was like, oh shit.
Who else comes in? So we were talking about Barry Windham, and we had this discussion on how, pretty much watching the end of his prime, he comes into the WWF as the Widowmaker. What do you remember of the Widowmaker? Because he doesn't last long from what I remember.
No. He lasts till November. But I mean, the same thing with Dusty. That's Barry Windham. Like, what the hell's going on here? And excuse me. So he comes in. But the thing about Barry Windham, the Widowmaker, that was different from Dusty, is that the Widowmaker got no angles. He really didn't have a push. The only memories anybody would have from him is just him working superstars and doing some squash matches. And then he was in a Survivor Series team, and then he was gone because of the money laundering scandal with his dad and his brother.
Yeah.
But he never had a good match in WWF during this time. He never had an angle. I don't know who his house show partners were, but it was just, he just came and went. He might have not even been on TV that long. Maybe 4 or 5 matches tops, and then we never heard from him again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was that one was weird to me. And, we just talked about how No Holds Barred is like marketed towards kids. the guy's character was the Widowmaker. Like, that's a little dark for 1989 WWF.
Yeah, that was weird. Like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, does this guy just make widows out of women that are married to wrestlers, or
Yeah.
like I don't understand that.
I wonder whose idea it was for. You think that didn't sound like a Vince thing, but I guess it would had to be approved by Vince at the very least.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe that it was some sort of slang for '89. You know, I don't know. It seems pretty dark.
Maybe I'll ask Dave about that one.
Yeah, ask Dave because he was around '89. I mean, me and you were around too, but we're not.
Owen Hart also gives notice around this time.
Yes, and and as according to Dave, he gets jobbed out. See, Big John Studd didn't get jobbed out, but Owen Hart, the Blue Blazer, he has got to get jobbed out, and then he takes off on him. Good for him because he wasn't going anywhere.
How dare the small younger Hart brother not want to work for the biggest wrestling company in the entire world?
That kind of mentality is still there to this day, as we saw Triple H cut that promo on Will Ospreay. So some things never change.
Absolutely, it still is today. Oh man. Who else? Where did my notes go? Dear God. Sorry. Here they are.
I mean, Snuka comes in, but that was in April. I mean, he's just kind of like a jobber.
So you mentioned the WrestleMania payoffs being which caused Big John Studd to get frustrated. Dave wrote that the payoffs were lower because of a different gimmicked pay scale, even though it was the highest grossing show in the history of the company at that point.
It's just carny for them to say we just didn't want to pay the wrestlers this time around. That's really what it is, right? I mean, I remember reading Dynamite Kid's book, and he said that when he first left his wife, he got his WrestleMania payoff, which was $20,000. And I don't know why I believe him, just because I don't know, it seems about right. And so he left it on the table. And then you're going through these WrestleMania 5 payoffs, and it's like $8,000, $10,000. I'm like, dude, what the hell? Like, this is the biggest drawing show almost in history, right? I mean, it is at this point. I think Hogan got $750, right? I think something like that. You know, I remember for some reason Hogan would always get $750. It just makes me laugh. Like, it would never go to a mill. It was always $750. Although I think for WrestleMania 3, him and Andre did get a mill each.
A pre-Nails Kevin Kelly shows up in WWF at this time.
Are you sure that wasn't the announcer that just got fired by AEW? No, you're right.
How many Kevin Kellys are there in the history of the wrestling business?
There's two: Kevin Wackles and Kevin Kelly. Yeah. And I guess they couldn't be completely different, you know. So.
Well, the announcer Kevin Kelly, supposedly he said he's thinking about a lawsuit there with AEW for coming in. Like, he left the New Japan job where he's, that's his main job for AEW, and then he really didn't get used, and then he.
But that's pretty fucked up. I mean, you leave a job and then you only last less than a year, and then what? Now you're unemployed, and New Japan ain't gonna take him back. So
New Japan has a young kid doing their announcing named Walker Stewart. This dude is young.
Isn't that a pitcher for the LA Dodgers or something?
He's got Tommy John coming off Tommy John surgery. He's younger than my kids. Like, he's that young. And he also grew up in Norman, Oklahoma. And so then, of course, I asked him the question, have you ever met Jim Ross? He said no. I'm like, you're a pro wrestling announcer from Norman, Oklahoma.
Then you should have been like, did you ever meet Mickey Mantle?
Exactly.
And then you should have been like, did you ever meet Doug Furness? Because those are the three people that I know that came from Norman, Oklahoma.
But like, think about it. Like, working wrestling announcers from the same town in Oklahoma. He said he has not, but I was like, you got to reach out to Jim, man. Jim would get a kick out of it.
Well, he's in Jacksonville now, so I
mean, well, here, this is we're veering off slightly, but I want to get your thoughts on the Jim Ross Missy Hyatt connection.
I mean, it was just as absurd as No Holds Barred to me. Like, what the hell's going on here? You know? But then again, it does make sense, right? Because they known each other. They've
Yeah.
known each other for years, and they're both up there in age now. So there is a comfort level to that. So good for them. Good for them.
I remember Big Dave told me. He told me just kind of like we were probably at his house watching a show or whatever, and he's like, "Did I tell you about Jim Ross and Missy?" And I was like, "No, like they're dating, like what's?" And they had already broken off their relationship by then, I think. But I was like, "Wow, like that's amazing." And then I guess Missy, like I didn't say it, but Missy was on some podcast and someone asked her about Jim, and then she just was like, "Yeah, I was Jim and I were dating." It's like, wow, that's pro wrestling is crazy.
Yes.
All right, so the you said Hillbilly, you said Andre and Duggan, but Dave says Hillbilly Jim. Now,
Okay.
I don't think I've ever seen a Hillbilly Jim versus Andre match before. I was trying to think back if I'd ever seen those two guys in the ring together, because they were both baby faces when Hillbilly Jim was kind of pushed, I guess. He was pushed as Hulk Hogan's friend who came
No,
out of
no.
the
Andre was
nature
not a babyface during that time.
in 86. I think because
Mm,
didn't Hillbilly come like 85, 86?
Oh, that's right. But it was, yeah. He was there longer as with Andre as a heel.
Yeah,
Um,
I just meant when he debuted and they kind of made a big deal about him. He soon became just a regular dude. Like
he
they
was
didn't really
like the
push him anymore.
ultimate per diem guy, as I call him, because he was really just when you're needed, we're gonna call you. And I mean, again, tell me what feud Hillbilly had past '86. I mean, there wasn't much. He never made it to pay-per-views. He hardly ever made it to Saturday Night's main events. It was just literally like you're the go-to guy when we need a pinch hitter, and they needed a pinch hitter for John Studd quitting.
Yeah.
So they called Hillbilly. Yeah, you're right. The Duggan program didn't start till later on in the summer, because at SummerSlam it was Duggan and Demolition against the Twin Towers and Andre.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was later on, but in the beginning it was Hillbilly picking up the dates.
All right, so let's move on to WCW. We had mentioned last time that they were trying to push Ron Simmons and Butch Reed as the Ebony Experience.
Yes,
Ron Simmons did not like that.
rightfully so.
And rightfully so. And Dave said because of that, he may have lost his push. So much so that the NWA was looking at bringing in Larry Cameron to team with Butch Reed instead. But Dave also wrote that Larry Cameron was a long way from being ready at the WCW level. That would have been kind of interesting, Larry
Yeah,
Cameron.
it would have. It would have. And for the people that don't know, they wouldn't give up on Ron. He would come back later. They would have Woman come in from Florida, as this weird fucking stalkerish like Scott Steiner mark. And then once Scott Steiner busted a Hulk Hogan and No Holds Barred and refused her advances, then she comes in with these two big African American gentlemen with masks. And then thankfully they call them Doom. They don't call them the Ebony Experience.
Yeah.
But it's still a white woman with two black men. And at that time, that was
the heat. That was the heat.
Correct.
Did you see this? Do you watch any of those WWE A&E documentaries?
No, they're a waste of time.
So I would say
Just
the
like
majority
that,
of them.
WCW was a big waste of time.
Well, the majority of them are definitely a waste of time. The one on Steiner Brothers was maybe the most disappointing of all. And then I sort of realized part of the reason why it was so disappointing is because the Robin Green character is a real big vehicle in the Steiner Brothers storyline of how they kind of come to be. But you can't show her at all because of the Benoit thing. So she's like eliminated from that documentary, and you get a little bit of Missy, but they just they fast forward from they're a tag team and they're in WCW, and then Vince poaches them, grabs them. They're unhappy because Vince said he was going to pay them more than he did. And then they go back to Japan. It's like the career of the Steiner Brothers that I remember, is like fast forwarded like 5 minutes.
Oh, so
In
they
the
don't talk how Rick fell. They kept on failing drug tests in WWF, and okay. Yeah, I don't like those documentaries. Again, they're very much through the perspective of whomever's being, they're doing the documentary on, right? I think they have a lot of say on what gets on and what doesn't get on. So I don't bother with them.
Yeah. No, I mean there has been ones that were okay. The Ricky the Dragon one was pretty good.
You know what? I like the Steve Austin one because at the end with his kids, for the first time, the human side of Steve Anderson comes out of nowhere. Not Steve Williams, folks. Steve Anderson, and it's like, yo, I don't talk to my daughters because of my lifestyle, and they were in England. So for the very first time, you get to see that. You remember that, and it was weird. It was like such a happy ending, and then all of a sudden you talk about your daughters, how you don't really have a relationship, and it just ends. But I did like. I thought that was some good reporting there.
All right, so more WCW stuff. We have Clash 7. Clash 7 it's so funny to think that there were only 7 Clash of the Champions at that time, but in 1989.
Well, it started in 88, in March of 88, so that makes sense.
Guts and Glory took place in
Not Blood and Guts. Guts and Glory. Let's get it right.
Took place in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Heavy USA feel to it. They even had Ranger Ross on this show. There's a video of like Missy Hyatt kind of out doing stuff with Ranger Ross, and so yeah, it's kind of it's a very gimmicky show.
There was no subtlety in this show whatsoever.
No,
like at all.
Not at all. It was very USA, but on the show they are trying to figure out the tag team champion. So there's 2 matches. No, 3 matches for the tournament, and the Fabulous Freebirds. Is this the Jimmy Garvin debut with the Freebirds?
I believe so. Yeah. This is the debut right here. I'm just trying to look at the card here, just so, even though I have it here in the background, I'm gonna keep on watching it. But yeah, that is his debut. He came in from Dallas, I believe, at this time.
I always liked Jimmy Garvin probably more than I should have, based on
what I'm gonna go ahead and say. Even though you're a little older than me, I'm gonna go ahead and say this is very controversial, but these are our Freebirds.
Yes,
I mean they didn't draw
kind of what I was. That's what I was gonna
compared to the real Freebirds, right? The big trio. This Freebirds more of a, I don't know, mid-card act, comedy act at times. But this is the Freebirds that I resonate with, because this is the first time that I really get introduced to the Freebirds. It wouldn't be later on as I'm older and I'm tape trading, I see the old stuff. Okay, now I see why there's such a big deal.
Yeah.
But, when it comes to the nostalgia value, Jimmy Jam Garvin's always going to be my Freebird,
Yeah.
It's interesting how that works.
Now, I will say that I did like Garvin in like 86, 87, because he is in NWA. There's the Precious angle, which is a version of what they were doing with Miss Elizabeth and Randy Savage. I always got a kick out of him and Rugged Ronnie Garvin, though, being connected. I guess was it his stepdad or something like that?
Yeah. And he was from and again, in hindsight, I don't know why I didn't catch on to. I don't know if you caught onto it. He was like Canadian for the whole time. Just his accent was so thick.
Yeah.
But I always bought that he was from Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm like, but this guy talks like he's from like Quebec. And he was like, and it's just weird how, like, as a little kid, all these things just go by you. Once you give somebody enough and you establish that universe good enough, like you just buy in, you don't question these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Freebirds, these are the Freebirds that I would have seen the most. There's no Buddy Landell here. It's Jimmy Jam, it's Michael P.S. Hayes, and Terry Gordy is
he comes and goes because of Japan. He comes and goes.
He's like the beef on the outside. And they face the Dynamic Dudes, Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas, and they win the opener on this show. I mentioned Ranger Ross. He beats the terrorist.
Did I ever tell you that? I think I said it in last episode. One of the things that, as a little kid, because that was the era where it was a little bit of it, like 89, 90. It was in its infancy, at least here in Venice Beach, where you started to see like a lot of the skating community starting to develop. And so for whatever reason, I didn't give a fuck that Dusty was a plumber all of a sudden. I didn't give a fuck that Barry Windham was all of a sudden a widowmaker. But it would bother me that Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas would walk around with skateboards and they would never ride them.
Yeah.
They would just have them on their hand. And I'm like, why don't they ever ride the skateboards to the ring? Like, but anyways, yeah, so the dynamic dudes.
The dynamic what was the what was the there was a movie, was it called Gleaming the Cube? Like there was a big skater movie back in like the mid to late 80s that I think
yeah, because right, because there's thrashing, but thrashing is about like that's more like what do you call it? Like what do you call it when you dance on the fucking cardboard?
Breakdancing?
Yeah, like breakdancing. And there's Rad. Rad is more about the
Rad's a bike. Yeah, Rad's bike.
Yeah. So I think Gleaming the Cube was about like skateboarding. Yeah.
So Ranger Ross defeats the terrorist, and the terrorist is Jack Victory.
Which will never get over today, by the way.
No. Jack Victory is like every person who they need, you know, some sort of person in a mask.
He's a Russian, person. He's a terrorist, he's an executioner. Whatever you need, that'll be Jack Victory. Hell, sometimes he'll be a terrorist and Jack Victory on the same show.
Yes,
it just depends.
Yeah. Okay. Now talk about controversial. The Ding Dongs.
Yes.
Greg Evans and Richard Sartain. They are the Ding Dongs. And the idea behind the Ding Dongs is they wear bells on them, which I think that's kind of like a negative for them, is so that everyone can just hear when they're coming. Like, why would you want to wear bells all over yourself as a wrestler? You want to, you can't sneak around. People hear you coming. Like, what's the idea behind this gimmick?
The idea behind this gimmick is that you want to sell little bells eventually. That's the idea. And I think this is one of the very first times where they're trying to copy WWF's cartoony characters, you know. And so yeah, none of these characters make sense, you know. What about like the Hunchbacks, you know?
The Hunchback. Jim Herd. That was a Jim Herd gimmick.
Yeah, that was and the funny story there was like Jim Herd was like, well, they will get heat because you can't pin them. And then like Ole was like, well, you could put a fucking hold on them and have them submit. And that was the end of that gimmick, because there was like, well, there was the charm of being a hunchback, you know. So yeah, there was a lot of these. You know, what was Mondo Hector Guerrero was some sort of like robot or something.
Yeah.
Lasertron.
Yeah.
And so there was a bunch of these. I mean, when we get, you know, if we're still doing this a couple years from now, when we get to 91, they throw all of them like at one clash. And one clash, we get like Big Josh, we get Oz.
PN News is probably in that show.
PN News.
Trying to be bad.
Yes.
So according to Jim Cornette, the Ding Dongs were also Jim Herd's idea. And so this is from a Q&A session during an Eddie Gilbert tribute dinner in 1998. This is on Wikipedia. Here's the quote. To show you how much this guy was in touch with the wrestling business, his idea was, let's have a tag team with bells on their neck, bells on their ankle, and bells everywhere. And we'll have them come out with a big bell. And whenever one of them's getting beat up, the other will ring the bell and he'll get fired up. The kids will love it. That was the idea.
No, that sounds like it would be very annoying. That's what that would sound like.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, the Ding Dong.
At least one of them wasn't a special person, and then when they ring the bell, they would turn to an aggressive person, you know. Because that one did make it through all the editors, and we did see that one in real life.
Yes. Do you remember how long the Ding Dongs even last? Like I'm sure they go beyond this show, I think.
But they're gone. They're gone by the end of the summer.
Yeah,
they're gone. Yeah, they don't last. They're like a one-hit act. So,
and the bells also fell off in the ring during this match. So the other tag team tournament match, Midnight Express, who are back, defeated the Samoan SWAT team, Samu and Fatu,
The head shrinkers, essentially.
the head shrinkers. Samu. Okay, I always love looking at the actual bloodline. So
Well, it's about as real as the one we saw in Vegas that Dwayne brought up. That's a big tree, man, and they're all in there.
So Samu is Afa's son,
Yes,
and obviously Fatu is better known as Rikishi.
yes.
So this, there's still the Jim Cornette and Paulie Dangerously feud.
So wait a minute. Now that you
on.
got started, you can't stop. So from Rikishi comes the Usos.
Yes.
And Solo, right? Solo,
yes.
The Usos.
Yes.
And
he's and his brother is Sam.
Sam, the Tonga kid.
The Tonga kid.
And from them comes Yokozuna.
Tama. He was also Tama with the Islanders, right?
Yes, yes. And from Tama comes Yokozuna? No, I think that's Sika.
Yes. Good question. Who is...
No, there's no way that Tama's going to be...
Okay, Yokozuna. Umaga is also his brother.
That's Umaga. We got to throw Umaga in there. Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have the Islander guys, which are now in the other Haku clan.
Yeah, who's Yokozuna's parents?
No, remember there's also a sister. A sister also had a bunch of these guys. The Samoan sister. So it's Sika and Afa. They spawned a bunch of kids, and then one of the sisters also spawned a lot of kids, and that's where you see the cousins.
Got it.
I think Rodney Anoi is part of the sister lineage.
Got it.
And then Umaga is also by himself. He doesn't have any siblings. He's just like an uncle. But then you have Rosie and Joe and Roman Reigns. They're brothers.
Yes.
Now, where does Manu fit? Remember Manu, who had a cup of coffee in the WWF like 12, 15 years ago? Like this big, heavy-set guy who was like not really talented. Where does he fit in all this? Like I never understood. Like he's somewhere in there.
Yeah. So he is Afa Anoa Jr. Or Afa Anoa Jr. Yes. Wow.
And then Jacob Fatu, who is he? Who is he related to?
I don't know.
Is he another Rikishi's kids? That guy has a lot of kids, man.
Let's see. Jacob Fatu is it doesn't say. So it's Sam.
Oh,
so
okay,
it is Tama. So it is the Tonga kid's son.
No wonder he looks like him. Okay.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yes.
Gee,
yeah.
I used to like Tama a lot.
Oh, he was awesome. Younger. The Islanders are very underrated. They were very good. They took a lot of bumps in those rings that were made for like the Earthquakes and the Andres of the world, you know?
All right. We kind of got off on, and I even lost my Clash 7 page now doing all these searches. Now I got to click back to Clash 7. Okay. So Terry Gordy and Steve Williams, Dr. Death, they ended in a double count out.
The Miracle Violence connection before they were the...
Well, as little kids, I would have never understood the reason why there was going to be no finish, but watching this, I didn't remember what happened. I was like, oh, there's no way there's going to be a finish in this match.
Yeah.
Double count out. Here's another gimmick.
Giant Baba wouldn't appreciate if there was a finish in this match, is what you're trying to say.
Here's another gimmick, though. Norman the Lunatic comes in.
Yeah, Mika Singh, right?
Yeah.
From Canada. He built his Mika Singh, yeah.
Whatever.
He built his rep wrestling Owen Hart around the horn in Calgary. Got a big rep as being a great worker, and he was never able to show it. For the rest of his life, he never showed it because he got this cartoon gimmick here. And then he ended up becoming kind of like a man-child later on, right after this gimmick in WCW as well. And then, of course, he went on to WWF to become not only Friar Ferguson, I believe, who lasted one taping because the Catholic community got really offended. But then he was brought back as Bastion Booger. And then, unfortunately, he passed away pretty young. So, this is one of those what-ifs, man, because supposedly from what everybody says, this guy was really talented.
Yeah.
Like a Bam Bam Bigelow kind of like bump taker, really good worker, and he never got to show it because the two national promotions just gave him some cartoon gimmicks.
Yeah. I thought Norman the Lunatic was interesting early on, but then it wasn't all that interesting after. The Varsity Club beat the Steiner Brothers here. Scott just takes a beating in this match. He
Dude,
like
this feud never ended, man. This feud started way back in like September of '88 with Rick Steiner getting abused, and it just kept on going. I think the official blow was at the Great American Bash in that tornado match they had, but god damn, it's like talk about going on forever.
at this point though, I'm watching Scott. Obviously, we know Rick. I'm like, okay, Scott may have the best physique in wrestling at this point, but he's not, 6'5". He's probably like 6'2". But when you saw Scott, did you think he was going to be like a big star?
Yes,
I
yes.
did too. And I thought he was going to be way bigger than he was until he went singles to become Big Papa Pump. Like I was like, man, he could have been like a single star, like way even before that.
Well, remember the first time it's interesting because with Scotty, they did the same thing that Vince did with Vince and Shawn, where he would kind of test the waters a little bit. Because even here in '89, we have Shawn Michaels getting a little bit of a push, right? And Brett is doing a singles run with Perfect during the spring into summer of '89, which is weird because he's part of the Hart Foundation. So I think Vince always kind of saw something more in them, even though both of them were small guys for that time. Scotty's the same thing. I think Scotty, there was always this idea that he was going to be bigger than he was. And I think right before Bill Watts came in, remember they gave Scotty that run with Rick at that Clash of the Champions, where and that's where everybody already knew it because Scotty had already had that rep from Japan, but it was like, holy shit, we got something here.
There's a problem with that match though. If they there's an alternate universe where they don't have that time issue and the match is way better and Scotty is like he's the one that everyone's talking about.
Yes, but he would do the only thing about the Steiners, man, and trust me, they're probably in my top 3 of all time. But man, would they take some liberties with their opponents, man? It's like they didn't protect them at all, man. Like Scott's doing. Go ahead.
In this match, Scott's like, I forget if he gets hit in the back with a chair or there's something that he scratches his back on. He's got this big giant gash in the middle of his back. But that was his job early on in the Steiner Brothers. He was the little brother. He was going to sell, take the beating, and hot tag to Rick, and then Rick was going to clean house. Like that was just the way that they did those matches back then.
Yeah, the face in peril, man. That was his job.
Okay, so Sting beats Wild Bill Irwin, which was kind of weird because he's like just, I guess he was in WCW for a few years there.
I would say one. He came from Dallas. He was there throughout '89 as a jobber.
He's pretty sporadic in WCW. But Sting, very quick win. That's my favorite Sting music of all time, by the way.
Yeah, him and Luger at the same time. But here's the thing about Sting, man. I said it last month, and I'll say it again. Look, in '88, he was already there, and then, contrary to popular belief, they didn't do shit with him for about a year and a half. This is his gimmick, going out there squashing guys, Iron Sheik, Bill Irwin, and then just running on a treadmill, right? Just running in place. And so I think the one that really, just really put him to the next level was the Muta feud that's coming up later on. Because before that, from March of '88 to around June of '89, he ain't done shit. He just literally just going in circles, and people forget that about his run. People think that he went from '88, from that Clash 1 to being a big superstar. No, he was still running in place for a long time.
The Freebirds beat the Midnight Express to win the tag team championship. I failed to mention in the Midnight and Simone SWAT team match that the Road Warriors ran in. Sometimes I watch wrestling today and I go, man, they're really killing the ref here where, the poor ref is just looking one way and the heels come in and they do bad things and the ref's got to pretend. The Road Warriors, there was some stuff going on in this match too. The referee had to really close their eyes to not see these big beefy dudes and the crowd popping and them going crazy. But yeah, they were crazy over in that to help the Midnight Express win. But the Freebirds beat the Midnights. They're the champions. And then the main event is Ricky Steamboat against Terry Funk. This was weird. because Ricky Steamboat is the number one contender, has not gotten his return match. Terry Funk comes in rated 10th. And if we go back to Rick's original promo after beating the Dragon, he basically says, you're at the bottom and there are other people in front of you. So they couldn't have, like, because Terry Funk is wrestling on all of these house shows. Like, they couldn't have added up some wins there and got him a little higher than 10th on the rankings there.
Yeah. He's wrestling Eddie Guerrero in like 4-star, like 3-minute matches, you know. But yeah, you're right. It does. I mean, don't get started with the rankings, dude. Come on.
I just found it weird. Like, why even give a ranking if he's going to be 10th in the ranking? Because he doesn't win this match. Like, I could see if he wins, then he jumps up theoretically in the mind of the fans, but he doesn't even win.
If we were gonna, if I don't know, to me it's like, if you know, I mean, they didn't know what happened. It was a money issue. Or we'll get into it next month. But if you know that Ricky Steamboat ain't coming back from that 6-month contract that he signed, which is always wacky to me, who signs 6-month contracts? But Ricky did evidently. I would have put Terry Funk over clean because like he's leaving anyway. But at this time, they didn't know. It was just later on a money issue came out, and then Ricky left once he wrestled Steamboat. But once he wrestled Luger, I mean, I just
Luger,
you know.
yeah.
So yeah, it was weird that they're protecting Steamboat against the number one contender for the world title at the Great American Bash. You know, I mean, the rule of thumb is that if you're wrestling for the title, it doesn't matter who you are, you always win because you need that credibility going into the match.
Yeah.
But here he won by disqualification. So yeah, it was weird.
And the other thing is now that this whole angle is not even really about Terry Funk. It's about Lex Luger, who's kind of like on the sidelines, and he's a big star, but you don't know what he's doing. He's supposed to be a baby face, but he's kind of been heelish of late, and he comes in, and Ricky begs off of this guy, and this guy still beats him with the chair, turns heel. Crowd goes nuts for this heel turn, by the way. And in the Observer and in the readers' notes that they write into Dave, it's like, this dude's on fire. He's good. He's going to be the guy. And what's unfortunate is that he probably is, like, he could, he turns heel. He could have taken this heel character all the way through Sting, but then Sting gets hurt and they need to turn Luger back babyface for the pay-per-view. And so all this work to get Luger over like crazy, and then they have to undo it because Sting gets hurt.
And then keep in mind that at the pay-per-view, they turn him heel again.
Yeah.
Because he goes with Curtis Hughes and Harley Race. So that's why they always say, the Luger job, right? You never want to turn the guys over and over, and you also don't want them to choke over and over, because they had to recuperate Luger because of all of '88, where he never won the big one, even though he headlined a couple pay-per-views. And you're right, man. In '89, he's motivated. He's on fire. He's having great matches. The one that we're going to talk about next month is one of my favorite Luger matches of all time. Probably my favorite, with Ricky Steamboat. And so here he's really on fire, and he's really like, he's got his working shoes on, And it's always weird to see, because Luger very rarely has his working shoes on. So to see him like that is kind of weird, but it happened, and '89 was a very good year for him.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so where are we going with this show? We're setting up, because also on this show is a Ric Flair interview with Jim Ross.
Is this where he's wearing the Lakers jumpsuit or tracksuit or whatever?
It's the Lakers jacket.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Why would he do that?
I thought he was going to be like, I got this from Magic Johnson or something, because
maybe he went out drinking with James Worthy or something, and then they just
you know what the late '80s were for the Lakers, like they were the hottest thing on earth. So
I thought you that's what you mean. Okay, I thought you meant the behind the scenes party.
Well, yeah. Forum Club, baby.
Yes.
The interview is like Jim Ross on the outside looking at this giant home, and Jim Ross is just so fascinated by this house and so beautiful, and he walks in, and Rick is contemplating retirement, or he got the injury.
One of many times, by the way.
it's very clear if you watch it, with hindsight, obviously, they're setting up an announcement for him to basically say he's going to come back and he's going to face Terry, and they're setting up the pay-per-view. The intriguing thing about this is, in order to get this angle over, your champion and your number one draw cannot be at any of these Great American Bash house shows.
Right.
So back then, the touring was more important than the pay-per-view, but they're utilizing this storyline to set up this pay-per-view because they believe that this pay-per-view is going to be such a success for them using this angle. But I just, when I'm thinking about this, I never really think about having to run house shows without Rick. But yeah, you can't. Rick is not there, so your top draw is not on the house shows.
Right. No, that is weird, especially for that time, because Vince would never go for that. I mean, he made Ricky Steamboat drop the title for wanting like a few weeks off. Like Vince would never do that. And here, Jim Hurd, I guess, is the one that's in charge at this point. He was like, well, yeah, let's do it. Because I think the house shows weren't drawing flies anyway, so it's like, why not? Let's try to go for the buy rate at this point instead of trying to keep the non-existent house shows going. So that was probably the mentality behind it.
All right, Dave has some notes. Now, he's not at all of these house shows, but he's getting probably phone calls or
he always goes to the open and San Francisco ones, which always pops me.
Yeah, he does. So, by the way, had you ever been to a Great American Bash themed house show before?
No, I started going way after they ran them.
I went to one. It was in Oakland. It was 1991, and it was right after Flair had left WCW. So, of the 2,000 people who were in this giant 14,000 seat arena in Oakland, the majority of the show was just fans chanting, "We want Flair," and they changed the card like 20 times before it.
They should have gone to the Kaiser Center or whatever the B arena was for Oakland.
Well, the original main event was going to be Luger against Flair for the title. And Luger was not even as it was marketed, Luger was not the champion yet, obviously. And then there was supposed to be an elimination style, like a Survivor Series style match with Nikita and Sting and some other baby faces against the heels. And then by the time we got to the show, the elimination match changed to just 8-man tag and one fall. So we were very disappointed there.
Yeah.
And the only thing I remember is Lex Luger against beautiful Bobby Eaton. Of the 2,000 people there, when Eaton goes off the top rope for the Alabama Jam, those 2,000 people had their cameras ready, and I was sort of blinded. I was blinded by the flash bulbs.
Yes.
And so I missed Luger getting out of the way, and then I looked and I was like, "Oh, of course he's getting out of the way. He's not."
I can't believe you had such vivid memories of that night.
I don't know why. It's probably because it is like a historically bad period for WCW. I went back and I looked at on Cage Match. I looked, because I was like, who knows if I'm remembering this correctly. I remembered a good amount of stuff, but I will never forget the "We Want Flair" chants. That's just throughout that whole thing. It's just
that was all over the country during that time.
Yeah. All right. So Dave talks about the tour, and he has some notes. The first note is the best matches every night have been 6-mans with the Freebirds and Lex versus Ricky, but he doesn't say. Oh no. Any 6-mans with the Freebirds, and then Lex versus Ricky as the main event. Those are the best matches.
Not surprising at all.
Scott Steiner pops everyone with this sequence where he does a unique type of backward suplex onto all 3 Freebirds in succession.
What was that?
Visualize what that was, and I couldn't figure it out.
Would it be them just holding on like a centipede kind of gimmick where they just hold on to each other and they flip backwards? Or
yeah, I don't know. I mean, Scott was doing pretty creative stuff. The tilt-a-whirl. Everything was like a tilt-a-whirl.
That screwdriver, a tombstone gimmick that he would pop out from time to time.
And he hasn't even debuted the Frankensteiner, I don't think, yet at this point.
Right.
That's coming though.
Yeah.
Lex Luger gets the biggest crowd pop in every arena, and it's a mixed reaction. Although in some cities he gets a stronger face reaction than Steamboat.
Well,
Terry
that would be
Funk's
that would be common with Steamboat. It looks like Steamboat would always kind of turn the other guys because he was such a like a cookie cutter guy, right? He was like such a like so he sometimes he would come off as uncool, even though
well, I mean,
the
that
give
whole build with Rick was about how Rick was dating all these women, which made him a bad person, and
yeah
he's a he's with his wife and his kid, and he doesn't listen to rap music. Oh, I mean, he didn't say that, but that's probably what he wanted to say.
well,
So
we know Luger does.
the
That Luger used to Conan used to always make fun of him because he would always wear FUBU gear and listen to
yeah,
rap music. But anyway,
my favorite Conan story about Lex is that he said, when we would do the NWO thing, it was like a slow cadence. It was like NWO is for life. Like there's like a rhythm to it.
yes,
And he said Lex could never get the rhythm. Lex would always say NWO for life. Like you'd have to say it really fast. So Conan
right.
on that old MLW podcast, which was classic, but again, one of
Very
those
white.
things
I mean, very right.
you could never do today. That MLW podcast was pretty crazy. Some of the stories
Yes,
on
it
that
was.
one. But what Dave was basically saying is that he hopes that the booking committee doesn't hear those cheers and think that they should turn Lex babyface, because he was saying that Rick, in his most heelish times, he was always getting babyface cheers because the crowd just genuinely liked him. So he was just like, you may be hearing these cheers, but let's keep this dude face or heel because he's doing a really
Right.
good job. He said Terry Funk's antics when he gets the forfeit win over Sting are better than most of the matches on the card. And what they're doing here is because Funk is actually hurting. He had hurt himself in one of these matches that you were talking about.
Yeah,
Whether
yeah, he
it's
had a
Eddie
bad
Guerrero
back.
match.
Maybe a broken back, but I think it's a bad back. Let's go with a bad back for now.
And so he's got to forfeit his matches to Sting. And I believe in the forfeiting, then he jumps Sting or whatever. There's a physicality to it. Dave writes, nobody knows what a Dragon She match is. And this is the Eddie Gilbert and Great Muta feud, where there's an idea of a Dragon She match. And Dave is basically saying, why would you put the Great Muta in this gimmick match when he's getting over like crazy doing all these very creative moves? Right. Like, why would you limit him in this way? So he thinks the Dragon She's is really dumb. And then the last one was that the Road Warriors and the Samoans still go to double countouts, brawling to the back, but the matches are longer and better than they had been prior to the Bash. So that is your Great American Bash Tour. And June is kind of slow, so that's really all of the news and all the stuff that's going on. And I only have two only in the Observer notes here.
Okay, let's hear him. It's going to be hard to top the NWA story, but let's.
A student at Larry Sharp's Monster Factory, after watching a WWF tape, asked Larry Sharp that when Vince McMahon talks about a wrestler having a patented hold like the Rude Awakening, does that mean that the trainees can be sued if they use the same move?
Somebody needs to smarten this kid up. It looks like he hasn't been smart enough yet to the business.
Okay, now this next only in the Observer, I added this because now I want to kind of lay it out for people to kind of think about how Dave would have had to write the Observer back then. You're writing on a typewriter, so he's writing it in a way where if he's got any news since he started writing, including like giant stories, he kind of has to fit them in the middle in sections because he's already started writing the newsletter. It's not like a computer where you could just go above before you print. Like he's actually physically typing this thing. So sometimes what he would also do, and he does this in today's newsletter, is it's kind of like if he's thinking about something about one wrestler, but he knows there's another story about that wrestler and they're not connected in any way, he just connects them like right after one another. So that's what this is. And this is why I put it in. Okay. When the Dynamite Kid retired a few months back, he gave Chris Benoit his wrestling boots and said that Benoit was going to be the biggest star in pro wrestling during the 90s. Now, in his interview, since Benoit is wearing his old boots and they are feuding, Dynamite claims that Benoit snuck into his dressing room and stole his boots from his locker and wants them back. With his crew cut and no teeth, Dynamite looks a lot like Butch Miller of the Bushwhackers. Just added
Just
nothing
random.
to do with what he's talking about.
Yes,
And he has
typical
to
Dave.
add that at the end. So that's classic Dave. All right.
I thought you were gonna say where he does the thing where he starts a story and he finishes the story, usually a blurb, not actually a story, just a blurb, and then like a couple paragraphs down, he says the same blurb except he words it differently. That's another classic Dave.
That is an editing problem where he
Yes.
forgets that he's already got the story in there and he rewrites it because you can't find it.
Right.
Okay. Let's go to the questions from the KLB Facebook group. This one's from David S. Should AEW do a stadium show in the US in 2025 or wait until they get hot again?
The answer is no. Please don't. I mean, they can't even fill up that little whatever they are in Arlington right now. I mean, I didn't really like the way it looks. I know Dave liked it. I didn't like it. I thought it looks kind of rinky-dink. Anytime that you do a show where there's no stands or risers, like it's literally like you just have people ringside and that's it. I don't know. It always looks very minor league to me.
Yeah.
And that's what we have with these Arlington shows. So if they can't sell those out, right, then they have no business running a stadium right now. Obviously, in the UK, they're going to do big business because they're only there once a year. But even then, I think I saw a blurb in the Observer where I think they're stuck at 40,000, right? I mean, they can't seem to get past that 40K, even with all these matches that are already announced. So they might plateau at maybe 45, 50.
I think there's a question. There's like a difference in the WrestleTix number and the number that AEW says that, and so it's between 40 and 45 at this moment, depending on which source you go with.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I wouldn't. I would always go to the source that's not AEW. That just play it safe, you know. And same for WWE. Like you never want to believe either of them. You always want to go to the source that's unbiased. I guess WrestleTix is pretty unbiased. I mean, they report some good numbers, so you would want to go with them.
Count things a little differently sometimes than Dave does. So sometimes he'll have two different numbers. He'll have the WrestleTix number and then his number. But so here's the answer that I would give, which is WWE is running Vegas for WrestleMania this year. If I'm AEW, I skip Vegas this year. I'm not running Vegas a month and a half after WWE just ran Vegas. So I'm looking for another place to run. I'm not saying that they should run a stadium show. Could they run a ballpark? If you're trying to maybe go for 25-30, maybe running an outdoor ballpark, or I guess in the summer, it's going to have to be some sort of dome or indoor ballpark. But there's another thing that I'm kind of wondering about, which is you just mentioned Wembley. I wonder if they're going to even try to run Wembley for the third year in a row, or they try to do something big in the U.S. And the reason why their eyes may be bigger than their stomach is because I think they consider All In their WrestleMania. So if Tony Khan has a great idea for next year's All In, and he decides, you know what, we're not going to run Wembley because we want to keep that special, so we'll go every other year. Where can you run in the U.S.? You know, maybe that is, you know, outdoor, or that is a stadium or a ballpark. Even if you can't put 40,000 or 30, you know, maybe you can put 25. So that's what they could be thinking. I'm not saying that they are going to do that. I'm with you. It sounds kind of ridiculous to me. I think Blood and Guts tonight may have had 5K in Nashville, and I think they almost did 5K for a regular Dynamite the last time they were there. So you would think this special show would draw more. So, like maybe Tony has some idea that, you know, that's going to work. Just based on what we know about their attendance, it seems like it's kind of like a big ask for them to run.
I think it's a big ask
building.
right now. I don't think it's even possible. I mean, they could do the 2-for-1 gimmicks, right? They could go old school. They could do some minor league baseball strategies to make it more of a community experience, right? But that would have to be in a smaller town. And yeah, you could put a lot of people in there if you do all that, but it's still not going to be. The thing is that they're not hot right now. That's just, they're not hot. And so when you're not hot, it's hard to draw. And so I think Arthur Ashe Stadium is going to answer a lot of questions as well, because that's that's also it's a tennis stadium or whatever. So if they can't fill that up at least halfway to capacity, then they have no business even trying to run a stadium show or a baseball park show. They need to just focus on getting out of the attendance hole they're in right now, however that may come, and that's it. And that's where they're at. I mean, today they had a pretty big match, and it only got 5K in there. They don't even have a match, like a future match, where you could say, okay, this is going to put a lot of people in the building. They just don't have that.
Okay, what if there might be one match? There might be. What if they do? What would it be? Omega Okada 5, or is it 4?
No,
5.
No.
You don't think it's that big of a deal?
I think they've done a lot of damage to Okada. I don't like the racist gimmick that he's been getting away with.
Oh my God, he was awful in Blood and Guts match tonight. He didn't do anything. Even his bumping was like.
Well, that's what concerns me about Okada. I also think he's getting into that whole thing where he doesn't feel he has to work as hard anymore, even though he's making a shitload of money, probably the most money he's ever made. But it happens to a lot of athletes, right? A lot of athletes, when they reach a certain level, especially when they have a lot of signature moves like he does, or maybe they try to get through on their charisma like he does, they don't feel like they have to work as hard. And so we saw Nakamura go through the same thing. And so I think that we're seeing
you have a nickname for this version of Nakamura.
Lazy Mura. We call him Lazy Mura. And so I think, but what concerns me is that when these guys do this, and we see it's not just in wrestling, we see it in basketball and baseball and football. There's something about their brain to where it's hard to go back to that motivated, starving athlete. Okada can't just wake up one day and you know what? I want to go back to Okada of 10 years ago. It doesn't work like that. You start working in this way, and this just becomes the way you work, I first learned that back in 03, 04 when I saw Brian Kendrick. Brian Kendrick was like an indie darling who was awesome in the early Ring of Honor. He goes to WWF for a year, and then he goes back to the indies, and he works WWF style, and he just never goes back to being the old Spanky. We never saw the old Spanky again. And so I think a lot of these wrestlers go through that, and they can't never go back to where they came from. What do you think about that?
No, I mean, I think you're right. There's a saying, something, I don't know, this isn't the exact phrase, but it's something like, it's hard to train when you're waking up in silk sheets. The idea that you're rich and, having that hunger. The boxer, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, what he would do before his fights, even as he became the world champion, he started making real money. He would go into solitude for his training to kind of remind himself of that hunger. So basically, no family, no friends. It was just him and his team. He would lock himself into one room, no television, just really the bare bones, so that he could have that hunger. And that's how he did it. But I don't know. Pro wrestling's a little different. I don't know. If you're Kazuchika Okada, how do you grade yourself in 2024? Do you grade yourself based on? You're not grading yourself probably, based on how many stars you're getting from fans. You're probably grading yourself based on, how much money you are making per booking or something, and to him that might be, or how, my body is actually feeling okay right now. I'm not hurting. And thus, I can do this on-screen character. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. But I'm just super disappointed. I am disappointed in him a little bit, because if he wanted it a little bit more, he probably could force their hand. I'm just disappointed in the character that they created for him. This is WWE middle 2000s kind of stuff.
And Shibata too. Shibata's even worse. Shibata's completely disrespected.
At least he gets to wrestle pretty decently. He gets to be a good babyface, but yeah, I mean, he's not winning any of these matches, any of these big matches. So it's weird. I would, here's a question for people who like to go to these Tony Khan press conferences. I would like to know if they have been able to grow their fan base from the sort of the New Japan fandom over to AEW by taking their best guys. I'm gonna guess not.
No. I think we first had that question with the whole WCW merger, right? Back in 01. It was like, well, did they bring their fan base? And the answer was no, because they were not giving us WCW. Same thing with Okada. Like, we're not getting the Okada that we got in New Japan at all. And or Shibata, or any of these guys really. So the answer to that would be no. And the thing is, it reminds me, I always use movie philosophies. It reminds me a lot of like these studios that make these movies that are complete train wrecks. And when you analyze them back, like Madam Web is the latest one that was a complete disaster. And the question that always comes to mind is, who do they make these for? Like, who do they make these for? And the same thing, Okada reminds me of that. Who this Okada character, who is it supposed to please? Because it's not going to please New Japan fans, because it's a completely different character. And it's so insulting that it's not going to bring in a new audience either, because he's got no credibility for a new audience. So I always wonder, who is this for, And going back to this whole Okada not being motivated, we also have to keep in mind, he's only giving what he's getting, right? So if he sees all this that he has to, every time he shows up to a building and he's got to do all this semi-racist stuff, or as you said, blaming racist stuff, why should he try, right? Why? I mean, he's like, this is what they're giving me, and I gotta watch out for my money now. So because he's in his mid-30s, so and I'm pretty sure he's a little beat up too. So he's like, I'm gonna go out there and just get over on what they think how they want me to get over, which is to use the shtick, the whole Asian guy fish out of water gimmick that I hate. And so that's what he's doing. My concern is that he's not gonna be able to revert back to like that Okada. I'm gonna make a prediction right now. Next time they put Omega and Okada in the ring, it's not gonna live up to the expectation, and not because I'm being negative. It's just because I know how this works. It's
like 6-7 years later. Like,
you're
these
correct.
Guys are beat up. Yeah.
I
I don't know if I would call this gimmick racist. I would call it very stereotypical.
Sure, that's what I mean.
Here's a throwback movie for you. Have you ever seen the movie Gung Ho?
Yeah. Jesus.
That's kind of the character that they're portraying. Now, there's not the, Norm from Cheers isn't making fun of these dudes behind their back in AEW TV. But I imagine what's going on is like Okada probably cracks up the American wrestlers with his curse words in English. And so they're like, that's who he should be. But then when, Mercedes Moné is in the room and he asked the Bucks to have her do her dance, and she does the dance, and then he acts like the Virgin Hulk Hogan and no holds barred, then I'm like, what are we even doing here? Like, this is who's laughing at this, and what does it say about you if you laugh at this stuff? Like, I would be embarrassed to laugh at this stuff.
Yeah, so we're laughing at him. We're laughing at him, and that's not good. The Okada from New Japan would have rolled up to Mercedes in a minute, and he would have had her in his Mercedes going on a date or whatever, But this Okada's over here shaking and shit, and who knows what some alone time he would be doing with himself. So it's like, so that it's a whole different character. And again, to bring it back to the question, they don't even have a match, not even Okada, Omega 5, 6, or 7 or whatever, that's gonna put that many people in the building. AEW has a lot of problems with their booking philosophy. I think TK is a very stubborn guy. I don't know if he surrounds himself with a lot of yes men. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But he needs to really evaluate his product. Now, it's not about catching up to the WWE. It should never be about, because nobody ever will. It's more about asking yourself, what happened? I used to be able to not necessarily draw sellouts, but at least fill up half the building. And these metrics are going lower and lower every time out. Every time you go to the same market again, you're drawing less people. That's a problem. I don't care how you want to spin it, or this or that, or presidential this, whatever. It's a problem, and he's got to really look into that.
And to kind of, we'll put a cap on this one, but so many people were telling me that if Okada went to WWE, they would just ruin him and he would become a joke. This cannot be better than what he would have done in WWE. I think Triple H would have probably made him a pretty big deal if he signed with them. I don't know.
Nakamura got a push for like a month for that, and it didn't work.
I don't think Okada would have been the top star in the company, but I think he would have gotten. I think he would have been treated in a much bigger way than he's currently being treated in AEW today.
That's interesting that you say that. I think right now we're in a very interesting part or phase of the wrestling business. Okada shouldn't be the top guy. He's 36 years old. Like he could supplement the main event scene, but this is a young man's game.
Yeah.
And so I think right now we were talking earlier. I mean, I think it was off air, so I'm not going to say the person's name, but we're talking about how they're dealing with the new generation coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're seeing that, I feel, more so in AEW than in WWE. WWE is like in this old person kick for some reason, because Punishment Martinez is like 42 years old. He's not a young guy.
Randy Orton's the biggest he's ever been in his life.
Yeah, he's 45 or something like that. So, and AJ is like almost 50. So yeah, there's something to be said about these guys in their 40s that could still go, which is something new. And I think because Vince would never give them a chance. But now we're seeing that a lot of these guys could still go. However, traditionally, this business, as is any sporting business, is still a young man's game. And I think as fans, we want to hold on to like that last 5 to 10 years. We're thinking Okada should be in the main event scene. No, he shouldn't, especially the way he's working now. Yeah, you could build them up for a pay-per-view. You could feed them to someone, but to carry a company, that era's gone. He had his time.
I agree. I agree with you about that. I want that character to be regal. I want it to be respected. I want it to be feared. I don't want it to be laughed at.
That's right. No, I agree with you. And just to close this off, a good example is Nakamura. Not that Nakamura haven't done stereotypical things with him, because they have. I think a lot of his promos, especially in his last run where he was the top guy with Cody, I get it. He doesn't speak very good English, but still giving him that whole gimmick where he's in the background and you have that noise and you got the subtitles and then you got fire in the back. That's stereotypical too, and so
he was like an evil guy from like a James Bond movie or something.
Yes. And so I don't know. I think from Nakamura we see that Okada probably would have been better off in WWE.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
All right. From Peter H. Talk a little bit about your Toronto trip.
Oh, man. That was really fun. It was... I got to cross the Blue Jays off of my list, which was awesome. Which
you have left now?
I got Minnesota.
Okay.
Which is hard because what the fuck is there to do in Minnesota? Like, the thing about me is that I always try to cluster these trips to, you got to make them worth it. So I'm not just going to go see a baseball team. I want to make sure that there's other things to do. And I was thinking for WrestleMania, I could knock out WrestleMania and go to the Twins game. Yeah. But it didn't happen. But I think they're getting they are getting a SummerSlam, right? Yeah, they are. Yeah. So I might go to that.
That ballpark looks really nice too.
It is nice. Yeah, it does look nice. And so I got Minnesota. I was going to do Houston. Remember when I was in Texas earlier this year? But Houston got hit with that, I think it was like a big storm at the time. Later on, they got a whole hurricane, but this time it was a storm and everything was shut off. So I was like, I just did, I was just in Dallas. I didn't get to go to Houston. And then I have Kansas City. So I got 3 left. Wow.
Kansas City is like an old school park now.
Yeah. Kauffman Stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah, and supposedly it's still one of the prettier ballparks in baseball, just because it's got that organic retro look, not the way that it was created to look like that.
And they've put money in it recently too.
Yeah, yeah. So, and they got Bobby Witt Jr. that's tearing it up. So, um, so I only got like 4 left, and then I finish, and it's gonna be a big deal. And it's like I can't believe I did it. Um, Interestingly enough, I'll share this story. This started way back in 2007. The very first time I went to New York City, I was 26 years old, and I went to Shea Stadium because me and my friend, he's a huge Mets fan. Specifically, he's a huge fan of the '86 Mets. That's a lot of people, because that's a pretty historical team. So that's where Darryl Strawberry came from, which is my favorite player of all time. And so when I went to the old Shea Stadium right before they tore it down, I was like, I could do this for like all the ballparks, and it gives me something to do. It forces me to explore different cities. So that's when I started doing it. And to bring it back to wrestling, a lot of the memories that I have of going to the ballparks is because I like wrestling and baseball. I tend to combine them. If wrestling is gonna host a pay-per-view during baseball season, then I'll go there and I'll watch the local team. Like, for example, I went to WrestleMania in Miami, whatever that was, 28, I think.
28.
28. And that was the first game ever where the Miami Marlins opened up their new ballpark.
Oh, wow.
So I went to opening day. They played the Yankees
with that. They had that big giant thing in center field, whatever that was.
Yeah, they took it off, right? It's not there anymore.
I don't think so.
And I remember so I did that, and I'll never forget that I was almost late to WrestleMania, and because I wanted to stay for one of the rules that I have. I don't know if you have the same rule. Maybe you don't, because you have a family and you have to be there for your kids sometimes. But if I go to a ball game, I'm not doing the whole 7th inning thing. I'm staying to I don't care if it's a blowout. I stay from the 1st inning all the way to the 9th inning. It's just a matter of pride with me. So I stayed to the 9th inning in the Marlins game, and my friends were waiting for me because I had the rental, and my friends were waiting for me. And so I remember I picked them up, and we're speeding, trying to go to the where the Dolphins play, because that's where WrestleMania was. And a lot of these football stadiums are built away from the city. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And so I remember going through cones. I just started going through cones, dude, like blah 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 blah. Just and then so we made it. But then like a month later, I get this bill that I passed a lot of like toll, like I passed all these tolls, and I got like a $65 bill for like all the toll. And so, but I didn't care, because my whole thing was like,
you just wanted to get there.
I get a lot of anxiety when I go to sporting events and I'm not sitting down by the time it starts. Like, I don't like the whole thing. Baseball and wrestling are the same. Like, if I feel like I'm missing something,
Yeah.
And so
or you didn't get your money worth. You pay real money for these opportunities.
Well, that was the year that Daniel Bryan and Sheamus gave us 17 seconds, so we didn't get our money's worth regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget that, man. That was an interesting experience. And so for this one, same thing, man. I went to the Blue Jays game. The only thing that I'll say, and I love Toronto, okay? I don't know if I shared this with you. I shared it with a couple of my other friends. I felt that I was there too long for the things that there is to do in one city. Like, I felt like, because I had bought the combo pack, right? I had bought SmackDown, the Money in the Bank, and NXT. So I was
3 shows.
So I was there till Monday, because I wasn't gonna do the big D where you being a dumbass and you book your flight the same day of a pay-per-view, So I usually leave in the morning the following day. And then I had to get the Blue Jays in there, so that was 4 days.
Yeah.
And then I got a good deal on a flight but it required me to land on a Wednesday, so that was 5 days. So in the middle of the trip, I was a little burned out, because I had done all the touristy thing already. I had gone on those sightseeing buses, taking all the cool pictures, and I was like, yo, I don't know what else there is to do here. Like, and I was legitimately bored. So that was the only negative, but that's kind of nitpicky. Like it was like, maybe I was there a little too long, but the people were amazing. I love Canada. There was food banks everywhere. It's right up my alley. I'm like a hardcore, like, leftist kind of person. So it's like, they have healthcare for everyone there. Like, they had clinics everywhere where you could just walk in, and I'm like, holy shit, like, I'm not used to this. If you're a citizen, you could just walk into any clinic, any hospital, and they'll take care of you. and I was just amazed, and they had the food banks and people were so nice. um the the dollar was a little more than the Canadian dollar, so that was good for my credit card, because I was getting good deals left and right. So yeah, it was pretty cool, man. And then I got to see, if you're in the wrestling bubble, that the Toronto fan base, they're rabid. They're like the MSG. You
Yeah.
want to see a show with them. So I actually got to see a show with the Toronto fan base, and it was amazing. Like I was like, holy shit! Like they get up for everything. So it was a good experience.
All right. What year was the best and worst for WWE from Mike V?
It's weird to that question, because, as you know, nostalgia plays a big factor in this. Um, but when it comes to just enjoyment, I would say 95 is pretty bad. Like I don't think I could watch 95. Best year, my favorite year would be 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, even though I hate the Triple H 5-match pay-per-views because I think they're a ripoff, especially with the prices that they charge nowadays. But right now, so I think my favorite time would be now when it comes to the storylines, not necessarily going there live, but when it comes to the storylines, and 2000. Because 2000, I don't know if you remember 2000, but everyone had a role, dude. Like from the opening match guy all the way to the main event, like everyone mattered, and it seemed like everybody was getting some promotion time. Um, and it was just, that was also when they were like intersecting a lot of guys. Like they would have storylines where they would overlap with other storylines, and it would affect the entire show. It was very clever. That was the quote unquote Senator Kresge era that Big D loves to always talk about. But it was
The
so
only
fun.
the only flaw for me in 2000 is very little Austin, because he's hurt for most
Yeah, he
of
comes
that,
back. He
most
comes
of that
back in
year.
October.
Yeah.
But what was cool about that? So Triple H had to carry the show, right?
Yeah.
And he did a great job. That's probably like one of the last, like really as a pure worker before he tore out his quad, that we got. So he made sure that he worked with everyone. So on a random Monday Night Raw, he could be walking through a locker room and he'll bump into like Taka Michinoku, right? And be like, "What's your problem?" And then and that'll be your Raw main event. So where else are you gonna get Taka Michinoku versus Triple H? And that was cool because he was trying to be Ric Flair, right? Because Triple H has always wanted to be Ric Flair.
Didn't
So his
he had some matches with like the Brawler too, I think, didn't he?
yeah, the Brawler. And then again, just the weaving and waving of all these guys getting a shot at the main event was cool, because that's something we don't see anymore. Everything's so like fragmented. So I like 2000. 95 is just horrendous. Like that's just that's the $1 Million Corporation. Most of the year they get most of the main event spots. Um, One time me and Big D did a list of all the guys they try to give a shot in January of 95 who weren't there in December of 95, and I think we came up with like 15 to 20 guys. And part of it was because the clip was like creating havoc for everyone. But yeah, what would you say?
The best, I would say, God, it's so hard thinking, because when we're younger, everything is bigger. Everything just
That's
feels
right. That's what I'm
more
saying.
important.
Nostalgia's a bitch.
I would say 1980. It's 87, 88, 89. They all kind of combine for me, but like wrestling as a kid, before I started to really learn about what wrestling was, like it probably doesn't get any bigger than that time frame. Once I sort of figured out the deal, 95 is a great answer, because I fall out in 95. I'm in college and I'm barely paying attention. And the only stuff I'm really paying attention to is WCW, because Hogan is there. I would have to say 98, because it really gets me back to the fervor of fandom in 98, and that is due in part to Austin as well. I
Okay.
know we rewatched 98. 97 is technically more interesting. The storylines are more interesting, but the reactions are just insane in 98. Like those buildings are just full, and the reactions, and Austin just walks through the locker room and they show him on the Titantron and people go crazy. And then you get to see like really early Rock when he really figures it out as well, which is really fun.
The Jennifer Flowers promo is the one that really put him on the
map. As the as far as other like really bad years, you could take like any number of years from like 2011 through 2019 and like find stuff that's like really, really bad. I wouldn't count the pandemic because it just kind of sucked for
but that
everything.
was horrible. I'm surprised we made it out as fans, right? But you're right. No, I again, me and Big D were just talking about this the other day. I think 2000. If you really want to put like an actual time frame where you could like have like tangible data, I think 09 through 2013 was really bad. I think once the Shield got the main event spots, especially Seth Rollins, which started happening in late 2013, really 2014, we saw, at least in the main event scene, we saw a huge improvement because this guy, he was bringing that independent style to the main event scene, which was weird at the time. Like seeing a dude like do 3 topes back to back to back, like we weren't seeing that shit, because they were told they couldn't do that. So now Seth Rollins, there was a time from like 2014 to around 2016 where that dude carried that main event scene on his back every single night, and so I thought the business got a little more interesting during that time. But from 09 to 2013, God, that was some horrible TV, man. Especially that, in 2012, they went to 3 hours, which is when it really got bad. So, yeah.
All right. From Andrew, who should John Cena face in his last WrestleMania match and his last overall match?
Well, it's interesting because you have 2 choices. You could give a nostalgia-based answer, which I would say CM Punk, because they had that classic rivalry that led to a very weird 5-star match from Dave in Chicago, which I never really agreed with. But anyways, and so you could go that route, right? You could do a nostalgia opponent, Triple H even, but he's got the hard thing, so maybe not. But one of those guys, maybe even Randy Orton, although I wouldn't want to see it because Lord knows we saw that a bunch of times when they were both in their prime.
And we were told we were never seeing that match ever again, and then they did.
God, how many times? Somebody needs to, I'm sure it's out there online, but somebody should tally up how many times that headline a pay-per-view. It's got to be like 25 times, easy.
Yeah,
maybe even in a row, shit, because it felt that way. Or you could go the classic, put a young guy over at the end, right? You could do that, and I think John would prefer that just because of the type of person he is. And if that's the case, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know who I would go with. That's on the up. Let me think about this. You give your answer and I'll think about it.
Okay. For his last match, this person reminds me a lot of him from the perspective of.
Don't say Austin Theory.
No, not at all. If I think about what I liked about John Cena in his early days, I was just like, he had such charisma, like underdog charisma, that you just wanted to root for him to succeed. That was the early John Cena for me. Trick Williams has that same charisma to me.
I agree with you. You took it from me.
I love Trick. I would do John and Trick in a babyface match, and have Trick as the young man, pull it out at the end. But they kind of, in a passing of the torch kind of moment. WrestleMania is so much harder, though, because it has to be an important match. You could do a Kevin Owens or an AJ Styles just because John had those guys kind of reinvigorated John Cena as a wrestler.
Or a Punk, because Punk is in the same boat.
Yeah, but I imagine Punk's going to be high on the card for something by this time come WrestleMania.
That's right, because we're talking next year. So, yeah, we only have one. So yeah, I would go. You're right. Kevin Owens sounds good. Yeah.
The other one that they could do, because this was very important to this guy's career, and then he gets hurt in this match, is you could do the Sami Zayn match because that was so important, and then Sami Zayn jacks up his shoulder during that match, so that would be a good one. I know people would probably want to see him in match against like whoever the new heel is, whether it's Jacob Fatu or Braun Breaker. I don't want to see that because I just be worried about John getting hurt in these matches. I
But
want
also,
his
we've been seeing that in his last couple of runs. Like he's been putting guys
yeah
over,
gets
So
beat up by Solo. Yeah. I don't want to see the mean heel kind of rough him up kind of thing. I would like to see competitive matches with really good wrestlers to make him look good at the same time.
he said he wanted to have 50 matches, which is ridiculous with the schedule.
He's gonna get hurt.
Yes. So I'm thinking maybe we're lucky throughout 2025 we get maybe 15 matches, maybe if that.
Yeah.
And you're bringing up Sami Zayn. I think Sami Zayn is good, but he's more of a B show kind of match with like maybe an elimination chamber, those kind of shows. But who knows, man? Maybe they'll go the Cinderella story and he wins the Rumble all of a sudden next year. Who knows? Like I mean, I felt they dropped the ball with Ric Flair on his last Rio run on that.
Oh yeah.
So they could maybe correct that with Cena. Even if he doesn't win the title at WrestleMania, it could come close or whatever. Maybe he wins the title. Who knows? Like with him, I think that he's got a lot of credibility and so much respect as a legend that he could probably get away with a lot that other people wouldn't be able to get away with. So it's fine with whatever.
If it's not something like Trick, I think what they could do is Cena's last match, whatever that date is. If Cody is still champion, I could see Cody and John Cena in a babyface match where Cody does win and they just celebrate each other. I could see something like that. That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Either way, it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be fun. Like I was talking to, I think I was talking to LaRocca on Fight Game, and I was saying how the brilliance of this John Cena storyline is that WWE is already selling out a lot of these Raw and SmackDowns. Let's say they get a little cold, or maybe they're not on that kind of run. When you say John Cena is going to be in your hometown for the last time and he's going to have a match, they're selling out that show no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's just brilliant. You have that hook. I know he wants to be on these Netflix shows, which means Raw. At least it sounds like it. He wants to be a part of that to make the Netflix thing seem really special. I don't want to see 50 matches because A, I don't want to see him get hurt, but B, I don't want him to overexpose himself on the retirement tour. I want those matches to still feel special. He should just wrestle. He should do promotional appearances at whatever the TV is, and then he should wrestle on the pay-per-views, and I wouldn't do any more than that.
I think when he said that, he was thinking of the schedule he used to run back in the day. He wasn't thinking of the schedule they do now. I mean, now very few wrestlers work 50 times a year now. I mean, I don't even know if it's possible. Unless you're working every show, like all the house shows and all that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm sure he's gonna try to get a couple of house shows in there just from the way he was talking. But yeah, primarily it just has to be important shows. Give me.
What they should do? You know what they should do for the house shows? Him and R-Truth in tags.
Yeah.
They keep telling that storyline of R-Truth. John Cena being his hero and stuff. That's easy. That's easy house show. Easy. But you know what? They're not even running any house shows in the U.S. really these days. So that's another thing.
It's all TVs and stuff. That's pretty much it. But they could do it for a TV here and there too.
Yeah, they could totally do it. All right. Will Julia and Stephanie McCurr have to stay in NXT longer because they aren't native English speakers? From Eli.
That's a good question. And well, first of all, Stephanie McCurr could speak pretty decent English because I like to watch. I really, really like to watch a lot of the luchadors and a lot of AAA and Arena Mexico stuff on YouTube. Just because I like to see the reality of how that crowd takes to the wrestlers instead of how we think they take to the wrestlers. Mm-hmm. And so I've heard a lot of stuff from Stephanie McCurr even before she blew up, and she could speak decent, not great, but decent. Julia's another story. I don't think Julia could speak English at all. Now, I don't know why you would want to stay in NXT unless you're going to take English lessons, but I think NXT is more just to train you how to work WWE style. Mm-hmm. And both of them need it because both of them kind of work on a style that's the opposite of that in a lot of ways. So they are going to be in NXT for a little bit. If they're going to stay there because of their English, I don't think so. I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But they are going to be there for a little while, I think. But more so Stephanie Vaquer than Julia. I think she's a star already, and so I think she's going to be brought up maybe within a few months after she enters NXT.
And not to say that she has to be in the faction that already has Japanese wrestlers, but
here we go again with that. You're right.
Well, but they already have 2 female Japanese wrestlers who aren't speaking English on national TV, and they're on SmackDown, so it could happen. All right, last one.
I think it's more so to get the ring rust, or not the ring rust, but just reintroduce them to WWE style. The rings are different, the timing, all that stuff. They're gonna be there for a little while. Maybe they'll both get a title run. Maybe they'll feud with each other because they're gonna be there at the same time, which would be great.
Yeah, that'd be a great match between those 2 women.
Yeah, just kind of bring that up to the main roster. Introduce that rivalry got introduced, in Japan. Then you bring it up to NXT and then the main roster. So you have like a Rock Austin thing going on. Mm-hmm. And so I think that'll work. Stephanie Vaquer concerns me a little bit because she's a little bit of a head case, like in real life. So she's gonna have to.
She's had some.
She's got some issues
with to her.
Yeah. She's a victim of domestic abuse for sure. But she's also, I mean, just look at the way she left. I mean, and even before that, there was already a reputation how she's kind of like, she's a little bit of a head case. But we'll see. Maybe sometimes just kind of making it to the big time humbles you a little bit. You mature a little bit, and hopefully she gets a good run because she's great and she has so much natural charisma. Both of them do actually. But yeah, go ahead with the next question.
All right, last one here. Who should beat Priest and Swerve for the respective titles? I mean, I don't know if you think he should, but Priest is probably losing his title at SummerSlam.
Yeah, Gunther's gonna beat him. Poor Priest, man. I think he got a bad. I don't know. I think
he's doing a good job for what his job is, but he is not presented as one of the top stars in the company.
No, he's not. And I mean, even at SummerSlam, what is he gonna be? Third from the top, maybe.
Yeah.
Because Liv and what's her name?
Rhea,
they got a pretty hot angle. That's above Gunther and Damian Priest.
And then behind CM Punk and Drew for sure. Yeah. Seth is in that match too.
So it's gonna be about third from the top, I mean,
and what? If he had any detractors backstage, when he fails to kick out at whatever that pay-per-view was, the PLE, the recent one.
I was there, Money in the Bank.
Yeah. There's your reason to take the belt off of him for those people who are detractors.
I think back in the day during the Vince era where everybody was in high school backstage, that would really, really hurt him. I don't think it hurts him that much now. I think
especially because Triple H really likes him, so yeah, it probably hurts him less. But yeah, Vince would have gone crazy.
So I think Gunther's gonna beat him, which is good because Gunther's gonna open up a lot of like new matchups. It's interesting with Gunther, like, was he hurt and nobody ever reported? Like, the guy just vanishes after King of the Ring. He doesn't come out in any Raws. Literally, they just play video packages. He barely starts coming out maybe a couple of weeks from now to start promoting this match, but he hasn't wrestled. So I don't know if he got hurt or if they just gave him time off to be with his new baby. Like, I don't know. But he's been out for like 2 months now since King and Queen of the Ring. If you notice that, like, he never wrestles. So that's kind of weird.
Is his family not in the U.S.?
Correct. I think they're not here. I think they're abroad. I don't know where. I don't know if they're in Germany or wherever, but I don't think they're here. So maybe he just got time off to be with them,
Yeah, since possible.
He was already the number one contender, and it's like there's not really much to do. So go
and if he is going to get the title, he's not going to have a lot of opportunities to go back home and take time off.
Yeah,
he's gonna be on a lot of stuff.
That's one of the things that the humanistic part of me likes about the Triple H era, is that if you're not part of the pay-per-view cycle, like Triple H would just send you home and you could just go chill and recuperate and be with your family, because he does that a lot. Like, if you notice, when a lot of these wrestlers aren't booked in that particular pay-per-view cycle, he'll give you 4 weeks off. like Kofi Kingston right now. He's not on TV right now. I mean, he's just because he's not part of the angle with Karrion Kross and Xavier Woods, or he is, but he got kayfabe injured. And he does that a lot. So I think that's pretty cool, you know, especially now that he's only having these 5 matches per pay-per-view, there's a lot of people that are not going to be figured into the angles. So you could just go home for a little bit.
It's funny. It's funny because in some aspect, you really like that. And then in other aspects where we always hear that these guys in AEW who aren't getting used and they're being brought to TV, like they're really mad that they're not getting used, but they get paid the same no matter what. But it's so I guess it is the investment in your future when you don't get used is kind of tells you something.
Yes, but this is why I would defend Paul and kind of have a little pushback with TK. The thing about TK is that he makes it an effort to book literally everyone on every pay-per-view. You have like 15 matches sometimes. And so sometimes it does almost seem personal if you're not booked. Like you have 15 matches, whereas Paul Levesque has pretty much established that he wants a very, very lean, like 3 hours, right? And so you see their plan. You can't take it personal with Paul because it's like there's only 5 matches, so there's only so much room. Whereas TK is like 15 matches, and you haven't been booked in 2 months. Like, is it me? Like, what's going on here? You know? So the ideology plays into like the criticism of one and kind of like supporting the other.
Yeah. All right, who do you think should beat Swerve?
Daniel Bryan. I think.
Oh, so you think he should lose at All In?
Yes, I think they're building that Cinderella story, which I'm a huge mark for. I love when they do this in any company. And now, from what I saw today, they're doing that gimmick where Jeff Jarrett is kind of telling Daniel Bryan, like, this is, you have a shot here. So they're using that whole thing when Daniel Bryan was going online and saying he didn't really want to be world champ. Remember that? I mean, now I don't know if he was working from the get-go or they course corrected because he knew he fucked up, but that's part of the storyline now, this idea that he doesn't see himself as being able to win. And today Jeff Jarrett kind of gave him a pep talk. So I like that they're using that. And it's like that's going to add into the drama of the match. And so I think he needs to get the swan song right into the sunset World Heavyweight Championship victory. And now we can't say that Swerve was a transitional champ. He's had it for a while now at this point. So yeah, I think it should be Daniel Bryan. Not that he's going to lead the future of the company, because then you're going to have a tournament, but he should be the next one to win. Well, what do you think?
I like the Bryan Danielson story. My worry is kind of what you said, is if then you're doing the whole thing with Sting winning the tag team titles or keeping the tag team titles again. Then you have to have a tournament, but who knows? TK loves tournaments, and maybe the Continental Classic gets kind of rebranded as like, chasing the world title or something.
Yeah, that could be their 92 Royal Rumble. It would work.
Yeah. So my thought that when he said that he didn't care about winning the world title, the only
thing about that is that we'll see like Dustin Rhodes in the tournament. But like Samoa Joe won't be in the tournament. Like that never makes sense to me. But anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but when he was saying that he didn't want to win the world title, and then people were trying to play gotcha by saying, "Oh, he's just working, he's just lying," and I'm like, so that's the worst promotion for this tournament, or this Owen Cup thing that I've ever seen. You got a guy in the Owen and you're dangling a world title shot, and the most famous guy in the tournament is basically saying he doesn't care if he wins. Whether it's storyline or not, it was idiotic promotion is what it was.
Yes, right.
So that's my pushback. I like the Daniel Bryan thing. Brian, only around you do I call him Daniel Bryan. I don't know why. I've been really good with the Bryan Danielson.
I should try to call him Bryan Danielson. Just habit.
If it's not him, I do think MJF is probably going to get it, because I think they really want to set up something for Ospreay to finally win it, and I think they would want Ospreay to beat MJF. Now, would MJF be okay with Ospreay beating MJF for that title? We'll see. But I think that's the biggest, most important world title match that they could have if they want to anoint Ospreay, is him beating MJF. I would like to see if to your your thing here, if Bryan Danielson does beat him at All In, I would like to see them run that match back at Wrestle Dream and then have Swerve get it back if you don't want to hold the title hostage. I think that could be really cool because even though Swerve isn't really from that area, I know he spent some time in that area. He's like adopted hometown that
Right,
area, and
Seattle, yeah.
obviously Danielson is over like crazy in that area, so that would be a really unique experience. All right, last thing, this wasn't on the question list, but it is on my question list for you. What did you think of MJF and Will Ospreay, the 59-minute and 59-second match that kicked off Dynamite last week?
I really enjoyed it, and I'm not one to really enjoy 1 hour matches. I don't think wrestling should book matches that go an hour. I think they're very I don't know, they're unnatural for some reason. Like it just hurts everything, right? I mean matches should not go more than 25 minutes, even when you're trying to tell like the best story you can.
I
But
remember
mhm.
reading like all the magazine stuff, and it's like, oh, Harley Race and Ric Flair went 60, and then you'd hear all these old school guys going like, oh yeah, we went 60, we went 90, and I used to think, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I would try and watch like a long match, and I would get really bored.
No, you
And
can, you can,
but okay, I'll tell you
go ahead.
the one that did win me over was Punk and Joe.
Okay, yeah.
both
That
of
was
those
for
both of those 1 hour matches, I was like, okay, I get it now. I get it in that aspect. But those guys were doing more stuff than the old school 60-minute house show matches. And as you saw last week, MJF and Will, to keep the audience, they had to do a lot of. They had like 3 matches in one to keep the audience paying attention.
That's really what you have to do, right? You have to have, essentially, you have to break it down to where you have 3 matches in one. And I'm talking about the shine, the heat, and a finish. Shine, heat, finish, shine, heat 3 times, because to stretch out one match into a 60 minutes, there's going to be a lot of downtime in the beginning, you know. But to your point, like, I really like that match because they took that other approach, right, where it was like bang 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 bang, and so it was entertaining to me, and that's rare, but I really enjoyed it. But Will Ospreay is my favorite wrestler, so I might be biased when I say that. I mean,
But
the guy,
both those guys are awesome.
yeah,
There's an aspect to, and we kind of talked about this when I was mentioning Flair and Steamboat. Like, there's a struggle aspect to those matches from back in the day that just does not exist today. Like, MJF was kind of joking in his promo saying, I beat Will Ospreay and I didn't even break a sweat. But he's basically trying to say that he beat him easy and it was a short match, when it's actually the obvious. But really, if you think about how hard those guys worked, A, they're in tremendous shape to be able to do that.
right.
And B, the lack of struggle stands out because the focus of that match is to set up the next big thing. So you can't really think about, oh, I got to sell this thing, or, we're going to fight for this position. It's like, we're going to do this move, and then I got to get in this position over here to take this move. And so it's really less actual sort of rhythm and feeling the crowd and stuff, and way more, we're going to do this thing and we're going to force the crowd to react. And the crowd was on fire for that whole match.
Yeah, it's all about reading your audience, right? That's really what it comes down to, and performing for the time and place that you're performing for, because a match like this would never happen in 1989, and a match like Flair and Steamboat, even though we understand what was happening and we understand the struggle, for a general audience, they would get bored, especially in the first half. But so it's all just about understanding your audience. And right now, I think both of those guys, MJ and Will Ospreay, they understand their audience perfectly, and so they had a match for their audience, and that's
Yep.
why I feel like it got over. So yeah, so it was a good match. Wouldn't have it often, maybe once every 3 years, if that. and it has to be with the right guys, right? You can't just have
Mhm.
anybody just try to do it. But yeah, it worked for me. I didn't have a problem with it.
How do you think he's going to do in CMLL?
MJF,
Yeah.
he's gonna get a lot of heat. He's gonna get a lot of heat because the thing about the CML fan base is that they're about 25 years behind, and so they still fall for everything. So
He's changed the belt from the international title to the American belt.
the
I'm
American, yeah,
assuming he changed it specifically for this show that he's doing in
right,
Mexico.
so if he could learn a couple phrases in Spanish to get heat, the guy's gonna get tons of heat. And so once he gets heat, the match is gonna work itself. They're gonna be booing him, and he just gotta be careful because over there they'll still try to like throw batteries at you and shit.
That's what I was thinking.
So he's gotta be careful with that.
So I'm very intrigued. I want to see the match is the match. The match is going to be fine. Like it's that style. If you're a fan of lucha, I just want to see the crowd reaction. That's what I want to see. I'm hopeful that some of that stuff will be on Twitter because I don't know if I want to subscribe to the CMLL.
No, it's like $30
YouTube channel
man.
or whatever.
Too much.
For one match. But all right, so next time, we took a little bit of time because of your vacation and just it being summer, and we're kind of doing stuff. And then last week we had the technical difficulties, but we'll try and come back for the July stuff sooner than we were for the June show. So we'll be back in a few weeks. And we'll talk about. I can't wait for July because I want to talk about this Great American Bash stuff. Like the Flair Funk stuff is so fun, even though historically it isn't looked upon as well as at least creatively and artistically that we remember these matches. Mm-hmm. This stuff is so fun, and it's really great. So I've been really looking forward to us getting to July,
and also and we'll get more into it when we talk about it next month. But also just. The Great American Bash 89 for a long time was considered top 3 pay-per-views of all time, So that's a very historical show in itself because that show's stacked, man. They fit a 2-ring battle royal and a War Games match on the same show. So that show's
they're having battle royals around the country at the Great American Bash tour. And the winner of those battle royals get a ticket to be in this big.
Well, they get a gimmick crown. They all have a crown. Yeah. We'll talk about it. It's so wacky. We'll talk about it next month.
All right. That is it from here for Draven. I'm Double G. We will see you next month. Peace out.
Bye.